20 mark essay question we're going to go through. We're starting, let's look at how many marks are available. So 12 marks are going to come from KAA, knowledge, application, analysis, and then 8 marks from evaluation. So that kind of tells you 60% of your writing should be explaining and diagrams and showing mechanism and definitions and applying whatever context they've given you. And then 8 marks for the evaluation. So that's only going to be about 40%. So it's definitely more weighted towards your kind of analysis, but nevertheless, evaluation is important. Now, I have an example 20 mark question here. The question is asking, the benefits of growth to businesses are so great that no businesses should aim to remain small. Explain and critically examine the statement. Now, this is an older essay question, so it doesn't have as much context as the questions these days have. So the newer essay questions that you're likely to see are going to have a statement above, stating that this is to do with, I don't know, a specific company or a specific country or something like that. So we'll look at those questions in the future. But for now, I want to focus more on the structure and how to answer this question. So first thing to do is identify the question words that we've got here and understand what they want us to do. So we've got explain. So basically in this case, we have to find out what is A and what is B, and then understand how A leads to B. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But basically the explanation or mechanism part is asking you, how do you get from point A to point B, and explain everything in between with as much detail as possible, okay? As long as you can clearly identify what those 2 points are, then you sandwich it nicely together, you should get the majority of marks. Critically, that's going to ask you, that's a kind of hint word to tell you, look at both sides. You can't just consider one side. You've got to make good arguments for both. And then examine is asking you to look at not just a simple case, but in different time periods, different market structures, and everything else we care about at a Unit 3 level. The next thing is to be clear what you are evaluating exactly. Okay, so before we can do that, let's paraphrase our question. So always do this, because they will always write it in a way that is a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, because they need to make sure that you've understood the brief correctly. So to paraphrase this question, all it's really asking you is, being a large firm is better than being a small firm, yes or no? Okay, so it's saying, as the business grows, is this going to be better? So this is kind of section 1 of your, section 2 really of your specification. If you look in there, you'll see a part which is talking about organic and inorganic growth and demergers. So it's really that page of the spec, and you have to immediately recall, this is very important, you immediately recall which part of the specification the question is asking you about. If you write about other parts of it, not only is it more difficult to structure, but also the marks are going to be a little bit more dodgy in whether you'll get them or not. So first things first, identify which part of the spec it is. Maybe I'll just quickly bring that up actually, just to show you what I mean. Just one second. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, okay, so if we look here, this is the A-level specification, and so it's going to be right about, yeah, I guess it's kind of here, isn't it? Yeah, so it's asking about the different types of growth here, and it's looking at demergers. So it's basically going to be reasons, this part here, reasons some firms tend to remain small and others grow. So it's, if you look here, it really already gives you the kind of structure it wants. So it's basically going to be size of market, access to finance, owner objectives, government regulation and bureaucracy. And you can literally kind of categorize your essay just like that. So there are, of course, other ways to do it, and I've done it slightly differently, but that would be one really good way to do it. So whatever the question's asking you, remember, it has to come from somewhere in here. They can't just, pull it out of their thin air. So if you've got a really good idea of what's on the specification and the points and the way they categorize it, you've already got yourself essay structures for every question. So we will be going through a lot of essays, but that is just one way to think about it. Okay, So anyway, back to the question. So the question is asking, large firm better than being small, just like it said in this specification, just to remind you, reasons why, okay? So now that we've understood what we are arguing, we can understand what we're evaluating. And what we're evaluating is small firm is better than large firm, yeah? That's our evaluation, okay? It's really easy to get sidetracked and sort of go off on a tangent with evaluation. So if you have written your paraphrased question at the top and then the evaluating point underneath, then you keep looking at that, you know, keep checking back to it. And then every time you've written a paragraph, just check back, okay, have I done that, okay? It's really easy to get caught out on not doing that. Okay, so on to the introduction. Now, what should you put in the introduction? It is not AS, it's not unit 1 or unit 2, so you can't just write a definition and a formula and expect to get all the marks. You should do that, but more importantly, you're kind of explaining anything which is vague or anything that you need to clarify, because that's how you're going to analyze it in your essay. So here I have identified growth, small, large. I think all of these are quite vague. I don't really know what it's, you know, large to, if you don't specify, it could be, you know, it could be Amazon, or it could be, because that's in the e-commerce market very big, it could be, I don't know, it could be eBay or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So we need to find some way of understanding what we're talking about. So here I've said there are various ways to determine the size of a business. Of these, this essay will include firms with high market share, large sales volume, or employee number totaling over 250 according to UK standards. So I've just put in there what I'm going to take a large firm to mean. And that just helps to kind of give a nice base to your essay, so that otherwise, if you don't do something like this in the introduction, you'll find yourself wasting too much time in the body having to explain little points like this. So feel free to put anything in here that you think is important. Maybe something like growth will be considered, an increase in growth will be defined as increasing levels of output or something like that. So that can be another clarification of an otherwise kind of vague sentence, yeah? Okay, so the intro, just to clear up anything, okay? And then we go straight into the body, all right? So I would recommend for a 20-mark essay question, about 3 paragraphs, intro, 3 paragraphs, and conclusion. You should aim to have 2 diagrams, at least 2 complex diagrams, I would say, well explained, well analyzed, and actually written about in the essay itself. If you just kind of drop in a diagram, don't explain it, and just pop it in there, you're going to get 0, and you're going to look incompetent. So make sure that you actually, if you're going to include a diagram, it has to be incorporated into the entire essay. I would say in terms of how long, I would say 3 sides, including diagrams, if you've done the writing well and compact, okay? But 3 to 4 sides should be sufficient. You can get away with, I think, even 2.5, but you would really have to get good with kind of explaining things really efficiently. Okay, so when you start writing, I would really suggest planning out well, okay? And the reason is because people just forget to answer the question. You get to the end of it and the examiner's sort of scrambling, trying to find, have they answered the question, where have they answered the question, and things like this. So just at the top of each paragraph, I'm going to put, what am I arguing throughout? Obviously, paragraph 1 should be arguing for the case, for the question, maybe even paragraph 2 as well, and then paragraph 3 against. So here I've just put at the top, agree, growth is more beneficial, we should always grow. So the first point we've come up with here is economies of scale, and I've put an arrow leading that to benefit. So my point A is economies of scale, and I need to get to point B, benefits. So there's a lot that goes on in the middle, but I've identified clearly what I want to start with and what I want to end with. So now let's have a look at what goes in the middle. So benefits, very vague, so we have to be a lot more specific how that comes about. So I've put economies of scale, which leads to falling long run average costs. I'm then going to include a diagram and explain that diagram. I'm going to mention some categories of economies of scale and possibly expand upon that and how it actually affects long run average costs. I'm going to link that to how falling costs lead to higher profits. and who that keeps happy, and therefore who is benefiting or why that is a benefit. So I've written myself a rough little flow, and this is a really, really good way to do it, because if you just make sure that the arrow is essentially saying therefore this leads on to, you know, things like this, and if you do all of that, if you go to, you know, the KAA, the knowledge and analysis are just really spot on. Yeah, that will be more than incorporated, you know. And then application, as I said, this question doesn't ask for a specific example, but usually it would, in which case you would just change some of the language to make sure you're evaluating that or analyzing that particular situation. So I've written the paragraph here of joining all of these points up. So I've said at the beginning, in what I've put in bold at the beginning and the end are, I have sandwiched my paragraph with answering the question at the beginning and the end. That way nobody can accuse me of going off topic. Nobody can accuse me that I've not answered the question. So you begin it with saying, one possible benefit of growth is economies of scale. Yep, answer the question. Therefore, this is a clear benefit of growth. Again, answered the question, okay? Everything in between is just an expansion of my points here, okay? So economies of scale are falling long run average costs, which occur as a firm increases its output. Of course, I have to define it. The firm operates on the part of the curve where there are increasing returns of scale between Q1 and Q2, as can be seen on the diagram below. This is what I mean about incorporating the diagram into your writing. You cannot just name drop it. I haven't actually drawn it in this particular doc just because I don't know how to draw a diagram in. Well, I do, but it was too much effort. So anyway, just imagine there is a nice economies of scale diagram there, and I've put Q1 and Q2. That's where we've got increasing returns of scale. Economies of scale can come from many sources, including technical and marketing. It would be weird to just leave it like that, so I've put in an example. For an example, when a clothing company increases its output of clothing, there is no need to run a second advertising campaign in line with growth. They will simply spread the cost of one advertising campaign over a greater number of units, leading to falling long-run average costs. So I've expanded upon how exactly these economies of scale are exhibiting themselves. I'm leading on to this bit now. So falling long run average costs will equal higher profits for the firm if we assume price remains unchanged. So I just put that kind of little caveat in there just to show even further analysis that I'm understanding it's not just a cost side issue, there's also the revenue side benefiting its shareholders. And then of course I don't want to stop there. I want to explain why shareholders would benefit. As the majority of firms are profit maximizing in the long run as their primary objective, this is a clear benefit of growth. Maybe I want to even go one step further and say shareholders share in the profits of firms, but this is only if dividends are paid out. But I think that would be a little bit too going off on a tangent, so I'll leave that out. But I've clearly tried to link as much as possible to the end result, benefits to who. So now that this is still contained within paragraph 1, here's my KAA paragraph. Now I move on to my evaluation, which will be the kind of opposite side of this, really. And the reason I suggest you do the opposite of the paragraph, of the point you've made in the same paragraph, is because often the opposite side of the argument is considered in KAA marks. So it makes sense, therefore, that you would put the point opposite and then point opposite for paragraphs 1 and 2, and then a final general evaluation paragraph. So we'll come on to that, but I would do all of those things separately because it means that the opposite side of the argument can be counted for both KAA and evaluation. So basically, if you've not got enough evaluation elsewhere, the examiner can give you marks for whatever you've done here, if that makes sense. Okay, so same thing, I've used my arrow method. So diseconomies of scale, increasing LRAC, leading to the diagram. MES, not good for industries with low MES, should stay small. So again, that's the opposite because the argument was be large. So I've put it in here. However, it can be, you can see I've used the word however, and this is super important. With economics exam writing, you must be super repetitive. Don't try and get fancy or creative with your writing style. There's a time and a place for that, and not in this exam, okay? Just repeat the same language, same sentences over and over again so that the examiner can clearly understand signposting, where you are coming from, okay? However, it can be difficult to know exactly when diseconomies of scale begin to outweigh the economies of scale. Remember, there are always diseconomies and there are always economies. It's not a matter of one appears and then disappears and then the other one appears. They always exist. It's just a matter of which one is currently greater, okay? So when diseconomies of scale begin to outweigh the economies of scale, in the diagram below, we can observe that decreasing returns to scale begin to impact a firm from Q3. Again, I haven't put the diagram in, but hopefully you can understand. Even in the kind of evaluation or the opposite side, I am incorporating the diagram in, which makes my analysis a little bit more sophisticated. If a firm exceeds this level of output, LRAC begins to increase and so profit level will fall, disadvantaging the firm. I've just, this is quite awkward language, but I've put that in purposefully so that you can, so that the examiner can see I am arguing the other side, okay? I am saying this is not a benefit. This is particularly true of firms and industries which have a low MES. MES is the minimum efficient scale. Whenever you've got acronym for something like this, you've got to explain it, okay? So LRAC, you can't just never mention that. MES is the minimum efficient scale and indicates the lowest point on a cost curve which is possible for a firm in the industry to produce at. So you can see I've incorporated yet again some definitions, which is showing my knowledge and that I've got a good understanding of theory. When the MES is low, many firms can operate in the industry, and so there are limited opportunities for firms to grow. So growth will be less beneficial in perfectly competitive or monopolistic market structures. They should remain small. You see, I've again sandwiched it with the point which I'm trying to make, which is that bigger is not better. Okay, so that would be paragraph 1. I mean, this paragraph alone would probably, with a nice diagram and the fact that I've answered a question, I think, that would be, I think I'd probably get about 10 marks for that already. If you do this well, if you work carefully and put in as much detailed analysis as possible, you really don't have to write a lot, okay? It's just showing good understanding, okay? So it's not about length, it's really about the content. Okay, so again, paragraph 2, agree growth is more beneficial. Again, I've used my point A as increased market share, and I'm trying to explain how that gets to benefits. So I've done my arrow system again, so increased market share, therefore more price setting power to it should be more price setting power over consumers, and it shouldn't be producers, it should really be suppliers. So to consumers, you get bigger market share, you become a less substitutable product essentially. You're more differentiated as well. So your PED less than 1, so more inelastic, and then higher price. Obviously with inelastic PED, if you raise the price, revenue increases, therefore more profit. And I've so I've basically put these 2 points together because they're quite similar in how they both affect profits. So more price setting power to suppliers, monopsony power, therefore they can set a lower price for materials and that increases profits also. So again, I have done this is the KAA part here. I've split up monopsony and consumer just so you can see it a bit more clearly, but that is just one paragraph really. And then again, the opposite side. So you can see I've sandwiched it again. Another potential benefit of growth. Yep, just to say I am answering the question. And then which will benefit firms with a profit maximization objective. There is my benefit answered. A second benefit of increased market share. Yep, so growth. Higher profits, which is a benefit of growth of firms. Very repetitive, but really telling the examiner I know what I'm doing here, yeah? So another benefit of growth can occur from increased market share. As a firm grows, it increases its share of the market, fairly obvious. This can lead to consumers having less choice over which firm they choose to consume from. This can decrease PED, causing demand for the firm good to become more inelastic. As a result, so on and so forth. I'll leave that up for you to have a read of. Here is where I introduce my second diagram. So in each paragraph, a chunky paragraph like this, you should have a diagram in. I've put here, in the diagram below, which compares firms in a perfectly competitive market and firms in a monopoly market. With more control over price, firms can set PM rather than PPC and so see greater revenue of PMQM rather than PPC QPC. I hope you know what diagram I'm referring to here because I haven't actually included it in here, but I might include a link that would show you. I'll put it in the thing just so that we're clear because it's quite a good diagram. It's a really nice, efficient one that you can use, but it basically compares the perfectly competitive output where they're price takers and they have no price setting power to monopolies which do have price setting power. So I will include a picture of that. Okay, and then the second benefit, again, just explaining monopsony and how that works, how that leads to lower long-run average costs and therefore higher profits again. What you'll notice is that in every sentence, I've tried my best to use technical terminology. So I'm not saying they can set a lower price because they want to. I've said greater bargaining power, yeah? And everywhere I can, I have put in definitions. Large number of suppliers, few buyers. You know, that is a monopsony situation, yeah? So everything you do, try not to make stuff up. Try to have memorized phrases almost of what you should be including. And to be frank, if you just practice, you know, every essay that's come up, you will see more and more that it's so repetitive. You just use the same points that you've put in one essay in another, because there's obviously a limited number of things that they can ask you. Okay, and then here's the opposite that I've put here. As firms gain market share, they will be more likely to be regulated by competition authorities, which is a disadvantage of growth. Again, sandwiching it, you know, well, I should really add something in here, shouldn't I? Therefore, firms should remain small, something like that. But anyway, yeah, so sandwich it again. So in this case, I'm talking about, I think it's 25% actually market share for Monopoly, isn't it now? You might want to check that. I think there's like a CMA, it's either 20 or 25%. Anyway, so they're going to be fined and broken up. So obviously, why would you want to get big when you're going to just get regulator attention? Okay, so now that I've done like those two paragraphs alone with those wonderful diagrams and just nicely explained, that should really get me the majority of my marks, but I'm just going to include one extra paragraph, which is general evaluation points, okay? So this isn't arguing one side and then the opposite. This is considering a larger number of situations and cases where, as I've put here, growth is not possible or desired, okay? So depending on what the question's asking you, if we go back to the specification, this does work in every single instance. So for example, if it's asking you about cost curves and the shape of cost curves, for example, it'll be situations in which the standard theories do not stand, stuff like that, okay? So it's asking a bit more of an understanding of the range of situations that could occur. So I've popped down some notes here. Niche markets, social objectives. Okay, so niche markets being too small to actually contain large firms. Social objectives such as NGOs or co-ops or whatever, whose main objectives are not growing, in which case, obviously, why would you grow? And then very commonly family firms, okay? So as you grow, loss of control, so different objectives. To just take you back to the specification quickly here, you'll see that within the specification and talking about the size of businesses and stuff, it's kind of contained here. There's different business objectives, and then I don't think it's specifically set. Yeah. Anyway, types of businesses up here. So anything on this page is kind of relevant to the question, if that makes sense. Okay, anyway, so I would just do one general evaluation paragraph. So I've just, again, sandwiched it. So there are cases in which growth is not possible or desirable, and so the benefits of being large do not incentivize these firms. And then at the end, I've put there are more benefits to remaining small. And in this one, I've done less arrow analysis, because I'm more just trying to show a range of situations where it's not possible, and it all kind of ties in together. So there's not really any need for me to go more than that. So if you consider evaluation points can give you between 2 and 4 marks, then the opposite parts up here, I would want 4 marks for my nice evaluation, yeah? And then for these points, I would be expecting more like 2 marks per evaluation point, because it's just identify and a quick explanation, but I should still get 2 marks for each one because they're good points and I have expanded upon them. So yeah, have a read of that if you like. And then conclusion, yeah? So in conclusion, you should always put a judgment, okay? And that just shows that you've not just analyzed it, you've weighed it up and you've made a decision. So I've just said something simple. There are too many cases in which the benefits of remaining small outweigh the benefits of growth, and so the statement should be rejected. And it's a pretty easy statement to reject because it is so absolute, and it's saying should aim to remain small. Yeah, so that's if you remember from normative and positive statements, you know, it's you can use that to say it's subjective. Okay, maybe I'd even include that in here. That's quite a nice little sub point, actually. Yeah, this statement is subjective and cannot be verified or falsified. Yeah, that's quite a nice little point. Anyway, so I've answered the question here, basically. So let's see where the marks are coming from. I think overall, if you get the structure, so you're not aiming for 20 out of 20, you're really aiming for something like 30 out of 20, you know, so that way you're really safe and there's no chance you can get cut any marks. So structure, having a structure already is going to give you some marks for analysis, because you've arranged all the information in a way that allows the reader to be persuaded to your point. Yeah, and then obviously having all this language in about sandwiching and answering the question, that's going to get you marks. But generally speaking, I'd say each paragraph should really be kind of almost 6 marks of knowledge application analysis marks each, and then kind of almost 4 marks of evaluation in there each as well. And then we've got our nice extra paragraph as well. Yeah, so basically that is a really quick run through one particular essay. I will be going through every essay that has come up in the last, probably we'll start with the last 5 years-ish, and then see if we have time before exams to go through more than that. But yes, so we're gonna go, yeah, so anyway, I hope that was all clear. I feel like that was quite a lot of information, a bit rushed, so I will go through another one really soon so that you can compare and see if you've understood everything that we've covered here today. Okay, cool. Any questions, please let me know.